When you start putting the blockchain forensics together, why we're usually very successful is because the data is immutable. It's because it's a publicly recorded ledger. All I'm doing is pointing out what happened on there. As soon as the other spouse sees that you know what they did, even if you don't have 100% right, there's usually so much evidence that they're just like, I don't want to explain my illegal darknet behavior. I don't want to explain because now you've like touched into the criminal element of things that they shouldn't have been doing. So all of a sudden they're like, I just want to settle and get this out of here. Like, I'm going to have to pay you back 40 grand. I'll figure it out, but I don't want to go to jail.
Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your divorce survival guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact. Hey everyone, welcome back. So today we are talking about something that I hear a lot of talk about, and I literally don't understand it. So yes, I'm talking about crypto. I just don't understand crypto, the blockchain, all of this stuff, right? And it's really confusing to people like me, Gen X people. And yet it's a really big deal in divorce. It needs to be accounted for in the division of assets. And it's something that I don't want you guys to not be educated on. So I went and I found an expert in this, and I brought him to you, and now I understand a lot more about it. And hopefully by the end of this episode, you will too. So if crypto feels really confusing and secretive or a little shady, I'm right there with you. But my guest today, Chris Groshong, makes it so much clearer and really helps break down how you can work to find crypto that might be hidden or even not hidden, but that you can understand how you can use it in your division of assets and what your claims to it actually might be. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Chris Groshong. Chris, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this kind of really complex issue of crypto and divorce.
It's been creeping up in cases lately.
Mm-hmm.
More so than it ever has, right?
Right. All right. I want to start at the beginning, right? Because let's say people in my audience, like me, don't really know a whole lot about crypto. What should someone going through a divorce understand about how it works, especially when it comes to like tracking and transparency? How does this all work? It's all very it feels very kind of covert and voodoo, and is it?
Yeah, well, yeah, actually, there are some aspects to it that are. You got to remember, first thing, let's put this into perspective. Cryptocurrencies are software. They are software running on the internet, basically. But let's even take a step back further, because if we think about when the introduction of the internet came around, right? Like people were going into businesses and saying, hey, you need to have a web presence. You're going to need to run a server. Mm-hmm. Right. And they're like, what the heck is a server?
What are you talking about? Right.
Right. And a server is it's a specialized piece of hardware that is used to run software and things for the internet. Cryptocurrency kind of has this same backbone where it has specialized hardware that protects the infrastructure. Why is that important? Well, it's important because the transactions that you're producing by doing a cryptocurrency transaction, right? When you're doing this, the data that you're producing needs to be stored someplace that's permanent and unchangeable, right? So immutable. And that's what the blockchain is. It's the ledger. It's the thing that says, oh, this address sent to this other address. This person sent to that person. Now we don't know who the people are, right?
Mm,
We just know
mhm.
that X was sent to Y. X amount was sent to Y person and between two addresses. It's more about understanding that this is just software running on the internet. There are rules to the software. And once you understand what the rules are, then you can kind of start to understand where the patterns of like why cryptocurrency goes through these boom and bust cycles. Okay. So let's start with Bitcoin because Bitcoin was the original crypto. Okay.
Mhm,
There was
mhm.
nothing else. So Bitcoin works on what's called a proof of work method. And essentially, instead of servers, we have Bitcoin miners. Bitcoin miners run specialized servers that are just checking the transactions to make sure that they are valid on the Bitcoin network. Okay, so they're just programmed to run one algorithm. And all they're doing is making sure that if I say that I have one Bitcoin and I'm sending it to you, Kate,
Yeah.
and I tell somebody else that I also am going to send them one, that I can't double spend it.
Ah, got it. So there
Okay.
are some checks and balances here.
Well, there's a lots of checks and balances. And this is why Bitcoin is considered a trustless system. You don't have to trust an intermediary third party
Mm.
like a bank, right? So if I wanted to wire money to you, I have to trust the bank to get it there.
Mm-hmm,
Okay.
mhm. Okay.
If the bank doesn't want to do it, they don't have to send the money,
Okay.
right? They can lock your account. They can freeze your assets. That doesn't happen in crypto. The crypto is yours. It's like having money under the mattress,
Right.
right?
Okay.
So as long as you have what's called the private keys, which is the ability to send, private key is like a password.
Right.
Okay. And your wallet address that you receive crypto or Bitcoin to is public. It's kind of like an email address. Anybody can send you email,
Right.
right? But
Right.
nobody can send email from your account unless they have your password.
Right. I see.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Now you have this dynamic of these Bitcoin miners who are securing the network. They're spending a lot of electricity. Like there's companies now that are out there that are public, they're public companies that are Bitcoin miners. Like they made so much money, they needed so much investment that they literally went public. They had an IPO.
Okay.
Okay. So there's
Yeah.
companies on the stock market that are Bitcoin miners. It's this huge infrastructure because you think about Visa, MasterCard. They have these huge warehouses and all this infrastructure of servers that are checking transactions all the time and recording all this stuff. It's just centralized,
Right.
right? And they
Right.
have to pay for the fraud department. They have to pay for the electricity, the air conditioning, the support staff, like all of this stuff to just so that people can do credit card transactions. Bitcoin said, let's just decentralize all that warehouse stuff. And if anybody wants to check transactions, they can. They can
Mm.
just plug in a specialized machine, connect to the network, and start contributing computing power to try to check the transactions. But if you're spending all of this money yourself, how do you earn anything back? Like like what is the incentive to checking transactions? It's the reward. So this is how the software is written. Every 10 minutes in Bitcoin, there is a reward of newly minted Bitcoin for the miner who solved the last block, meaning the last block of transactions. So Bitcoin says every 10 minutes, package up all of the transactions that just happened and
Okay.
send them out to let the miners check them to make sure that they're valid, that no one's trying to spend it in two different places and blah, 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 all these things. When they solve the block of data, they kind of like raise their hand to the network and said, I solved it first.
Uh-huh.
And
Solving
then they get it.
meaning they like reconciled the balances,
Yeah.
reconciled the
Yes.
accounts. Mm-hmm, hmm.
Basically. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
They're basically
Got it.
saying all the transactions that had just occurred, I've processed them. They're all valid. They're good to go. I'm time stamping this chunk of data and somebody else double check it. So then when the miners start double checking, but the first person gets what's called the mining reward of newly minted Bitcoin.
Mm.
When Bitcoin started, it was 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes.
Wow. Those people are really rich right now.
Yeah, well, but see, this is all the thing. This is the timing, right? When it was worth pennies, when it hit $1,000, most of those people try to cash out because
Mm.
the 1000x. That's
Right.
like insane. They've made, so early people probably already got out, and then it was too expensive though for them to get back in. Then there's the second like generation, right? After what's called a halving, people who get in later, right? So part of the software is, yes, every 10 minutes, new Bitcoins are being rewarded to the people who solve and check the transactions. So excuse me. This happens, a reduction in the reward happens every 4 years.
Hmm.
Okay. This is kind of just, this is built into the software. This is why Bitcoin, if you look historically, has these 4 year cycles that go up and then they crash.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Why does this happen? It's because of the halving. They call it the halving, meaning after 10,000 blocks, which is approximately 4 years,
Okay.
the reward gets cut in half. For the first 10,000 blocks, it went from 50 to 25. Then it gets cut in half again. And every 4 years, this happens. Now, think about this from the miner's perspective. You were producing 50 widgets on Monday. The halving happened on Tuesday. All of your machines are all still plugged in.
Mm-hmm.
Your fixed costs for electricity and manpower, and that's all the same. But on Tuesday, no matter how hard you try, you can only produce 50% as
Right.
much as you did the day before. So if it was, no matter how hard you try, you're only getting 25 Bitcoins.
So that kind of sucks for them.
It does. But what does that force the price to do? It has to come up to match the amount of money that you're
Yeah.
putting in to produce them. Right? What people don't realize, they think, oh,
Mhm.
this is just magic internet money. But the value comes from people who are actually putting in the money into the electricity, the
Mm.
infrastructure.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
when they know that their fixed costs are X and they produce 5 Bitcoin, that how much does the cost of each Bitcoin need to be for them in order for them to sell it to cover their costs, to keep an operation and then make some on top. But this every 4 years, what is happening is that these miners then sometimes have to unplug their machines because it gets too expensive. Because no matter how hard you try, you can only make 50%.
Right. Sure.
So there becomes an equilibrium balance that
Mm.
needs to happen between the market price and what the miners' costs are.
Okay.
And so that's usually 6 months to 9 months after a halving, we get a spike in the price.
I see.
Okay.
I
And
see.
you can just look at the charts. Like
Right.
just,
Right. Right.
and then what happens? It gets
Uh-huh.
overinflated because so many people are pouring in, new people. They're going, oh my gosh, Bitcoin's now at 100,000, right? When Bitcoin hit 20,000, everybody lost their mind. People haven't lost their mind yet at 100,000. We still are on our way up.
Wow.
If
Okay.
you just go back and look at historical chart data,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see there's a 10 to 20x from the previous bottom. So it goes up, then it crashes. And the new low is always higher than the previous low. So
Right.
if you bought in 4 years ago and you held it for when it went up and you never sold it and it went down, it's still going to be higher than it was
When you
4 years
bought
ago.
it.
And
Right.
it's
Mhm.
never going to go back to where that was 4 years ago.
I mean, do we have enough? Like, we definitely know this about the stock market, right? Because we've got 100 years of data on the stock market. With crypto, we don't have. Do we know this for sure? With Bitcoin, let's say, right? Because Bitcoin is the oldest and most traded, and all of those things. But like,
Mhm.
do we know that? Like, how many years have these cycles been in place?
Well, we're currently at 3.125 Bitcoin. That's the reward. If we
Yeah,
started at
it
50,
started at 50. So
50, the
how
one
many
halving
years?
is 25,
Mm-hmm.
another halving,
Uh-huh.
12.5. So
Uh-huh.
that's two halvings. So that's 8 years.
8 years. Uh-huh.
Then we went to 6.25.
Okay. So
That's
that's
12
12
years,
years. So now we're at eight.
right? We're at
You're at
3.1.
16 years.
Well, and it started in 2009. So yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So
So we have enough.
we're,
You think like 16 years is
I mean,
substantial?
I've lived these cycles. Like I see them. It's just like it's because that's how the software is built.
Yeah.
If you cut something in half and it costs X to produce, the value of those things, you have to sell them for more
Yeah.
to
Okay.
cover your costs. Otherwise, you're operating at a loss,
Right. Right. Of
right?
course. Of course. Okay.
So,
So, okay. So there,
but this is, let me tie this back into divorce. Why this is so important is because
yeah.
4 year cycles. So now you understand, like, okay, you
Uh-huh.
understand why there's a value to Bitcoin, why this happened, what is the infrastructure behind it. If the price is going to go up like 10 to 20x every 4 years, that could be life-changing money for somebody. And if things aren't going well in the marriage, and it was started out as like, oh, I just want to get some, like we should just have some in our portfolio. Everybody's doing it. Well, $10,000 can turn into 100. $50,000 investment can turn into 1 million.
Right.
This is like, because if there's always a 10 to 20x and you wait a full cycle, if you catch the next top and you sell at the next top, oh my gosh, like now you don't want to share how much you actually have with your spouse, and you don't want to let them into knowing that you're doing really well. And it's not in a bank, it's not in any shared place. And usually what happens is, like, again, this was a hobby investment, or one spouse is like, sure, go ahead and put it in there. I don't care. I don't even know what crypto is. Like, we're going
Mm-hmm.
to have some. Hopefully, we make some money. Let's just see
That's
how it
right.
goes.
Right.
Risk reward. And I'm going
Right.
to let that person, the other spouse, handle the whole thing. And so you don't really know. Like sometimes in passing, you have conversations and they'll be like, oh, we're doing really well with our Bitcoin and our Ethereum and our crypto. It's doing really well right now. Oh, how well? Oh, well, we've got like 80 grand. But that was like maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago. And then all of a
Mhm.
sudden now it's like, well, how much do we have now?
Right.
Right? Or all of a sudden
Right.
we're getting close to a new all-time high. And then boom, I want to get divorced. Why all of the sudden when Bitcoin's at its highest?
Yeah. Well.
Right? Because you think like, okay, well now I have a $500,000 that they don't know about, and I can like
Mhm.
go start my other life.
Mhm. The miners are actually tracking these things. They are reconciling the accounts. So
They're
there
not
is
tracking them, they're recording them
a
for all,
record.
they're
Yes.
recording them in a permanent ledger for all time. So that folks like me can go back with special tools and then track and trace things. So I can go back and look at transactions that happened in 2010,
Yeah.
right? They're still there for all
Right.
time.
But you can, so you have, but you, if you don't have the pass key, right? It's how do you,
It's all public.
right?
It's a public ledger, so you can see every transaction that's ever happened. What you need in order to do tracking and tracing well is you need starting points, right? So you need to know like what the address was of the account holder. And we'll get into some more like details around what people need to know specifically, like,
Okay.
and
Right.
things to ask during like interrogatories and discovery,
Right.
so that they can get a holistic picture of what is actually happening. Because there's a lot of crypto has evolved so much that there are things like staking. Staking is like getting interest on your money,
Oh,
right? It's like opening a CD.
okay.
So you lock crypto into a smart contract. The smart contract is essentially a CD. And
Hmm.
it says if you lock it for 6 months, you'll get X percent.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Okay. And so now what this does is, because you got to think about, so from a liquidity perspective, what people are trying to do at these exchanges is have enough of that cryptocurrency to be able to make a market, right? They need trading pairs. So they need to have a bunch of Bitcoin. They need to have a bunch of dollars. They need to have a bunch of Ethereum. They need to have a bunch of this token or that token, so that when people go to make a trade, that there's enough there to cover all the trades, right? So
Mhm.
this is, look, it's liquidity. When you get people to put in their money and like right into the bank for 6 months, the bank knows it has 6 months that it can play with that money.
Right. Right. Sure.
Basically, crypto is like rewriting the banking. They're like recreating the banking system and
Hmm.
playing with it at a like lightning pace. They're testing things like, so when I mentioned IPO of a mining company. I remember like 10 or 15 years ago, Sprouts, the grocer, was going public, and I was like, oh, I like that company. I'm gonna try to buy some stock when they go public. And then I realized I can't. I have to have $100,000 and be a registered investor with over $1 million of assets to get access to an IPO.
Oh,
And I was like, well, that's messed up. I just want to buy stock in this company that's about to launch.
right,
Why can't I just make that decision?
right.
It's my risk reward. If I think it's good, let me put a 5, 10,000 or 500. Like, let me just get in. Nope,
Yeah.
can't do it. So
Okay.
then in 2017, Ethereum created ICOs, initial coin offerings, and it was like going public, and
Oh,
it was crazy, and people were making a lot of money, and then the project wouldn't actually be able to physically do the things that they said they were going to do, and then they would close down shop. A lot of people created scams and ran away with the money. So
huh.
there are a lot of these opportunities to invest in crypto and make 100x on your money. And so people get drawn into these things and then they think they're going to get rich. And that's the allure is like, I'm going to get filthy rich on free money.
Right, right. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then on the other side of the break, I want to get into a little bit more into how this is a danger for divorce, because it's not just earnings, right? There's also losses involved, as you just said. So we're going to pick up after the break and talk about that. Divorce is overwhelming. I know. I've been there. That's why I created a set of tools to help my private coaching clients navigate the process with clarity and confidence. Now, those same tools are available to you in the Divorce Survival Guide Resource Bundle, a collection of over 20 documents to support you at every stage. Inside, you'll find things like how to tell your kids you're getting a divorce, a comprehensive parenting plan template, questions to ask when hiring an attorney, tools for processing relationship grief, plus my divorce planner to track everything from finances to custody arrangements, and 20 more resources I can't even get into listing here. These are the exact resources I created for my clients, now available for anyone going through divorce. You don't have to do this alone. Get the bundle today at kateanthony.com/bundle. Okay, so we are back. Before the break, you were talking about how some of the ICOs, people could get sucked in and scammed. I think, was that what happened with when Trump did some crazy ass thing what was that?
The meme coin.
Yeah.
So meme coins are like a crappier version of ICOs, which like even worse than
Uh-huh.
ICOs.
Uh-huh.
So at least an ICO was like, I'm starting a company.
Right.
I want to do X. And here's a white paper that describes the business because they were trying to get investors. There's pitch decks. Like
I see. They're actual businesses.
they were, well, I mean, a lot of them were fake businesses, right? With just
Right.
like a white paper. Like
Gotcha.
just write a 13 to 25 page paper about what you want to accomplish, a business outline, like everything you would
Yeah.
do, just create a business. And then
Right.
you're getting like venture capital and just the public can just invest. But at least there was supposedly something to it. Like they were going to actually build something.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
A meme coin is literally just a meme
It's
that
a
people just believe is fun, or they want to own something because of the name, but there's nothing behind it. There's literally nothing behind it.
Okay.
And that's where all these, like a lot of these rug pulls, that's why the value went up, because it's literally just playing on people's psychology. Everyone is FOMOing in, right? Fear of missing out. I got to buy some of this Trump coin because I voted for him. And then they buy in at 75 cents and it goes up to like $75. And they're like, holy crap, this is going to the moon. Then they hold it too long and it goes down to like $13 or something. And they're like, what the hell?
Right.
Right. Or maybe they buy in at 50, it goes to 90. They didn't sell. Now it's at 13. And they're like, I just lost a bunch of money.
Right.
But there's nothing to it. And there's no repercussions.
Right. This is the thing, right? Is that it's not FDIC insured. There is, and that's part of the whole point, right? Is that the whole purpose of crypto was to get around the government regulations, but yet some of those regulations actually are protections.
I wouldn't say it's to get around regulation per se. I would say it's to give people an alternate system to operate in outside of a government run financial system.
All right. So let's talk about what are some, let's say, red flags that someone should look out for if they suspect their spouse is hiding crypto. We started talking about sort of, I mean, obviously one is if you've ever had a conversation about crypto, the crypto better be on your disclosures. But what if you've never had a conversation? You're not really sure. You're like, I think there might be some crypto. Like, what are you looking for?
If they're not being forthright, one of the things that I always recommend is to subpoena Apple Play Store, Apple or Google Play Store for phone applications that have been downloaded,
Oh,
right?
that's interesting.
Because there's a lot of mobile wallets out there. You can see if they ever installed a Coinbase wallet, a Kraken wallet, a Trust wallet, a whatever company, random ass wallet name. And okay, well, you said you didn't have any, but you have 4 mobile crypto wallets on your phone, or that
Uh-huh.
you've at least downloaded them and played with,
Right. At some
right?
point.
Because
Hmm.
because even if you subpoena the device, right, you can delete those things from the device.
Right. Right. You can
And
hide them.
and
Right. Hmm.
and because if you're the one with the private key and the seed phrase, which is basically a seed phrase is the master password for the wallet, then you can
Hmm.
recreate it anywhere,
I see.
right?
Right. So you can download, so you can delete the app and then
Hmm.
download it somewhere else. As long as you have the information, you can log back in. So
Yeah,
like
it just
username and password. Hmm.
after inspection, you just download it again to the phone and then put in the key and poof, your wallet's right there. Because Bitcoins live on the blockchain. They're basically they live on the ledger. They're not like on my phone. They're
Right.
not
Right.
on the hardware. I'm signing, right? Just like my email doesn't live in my phone, it lives on a server somewhere that like Google's controlling, right?
Right. 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 Right.
And I'm using a password to say send it. It's the
Send it down
same.
to my, yes. Right. Send it
I'm
from the
just
server to my phone.
no, sending it from one person on the server to another person on the server, right? That's what it's doing. It's like
Okay.
I'm just reassigning ownership. They don't live on the device, which is sometimes people will be like, oh, I remember there's a thumb drive thingy, right? And it looks like a little USB stick.
Right.
Those are like hardware wallets. Now, people think that it's just like a USB drive
Hmm.
because if you have the USB drive in your hand, the data is on the drive. It's
Hmm.
not like the password to get access to the data on the server somewhere. It's physically on that device. But a hardware wallet for Bitcoin is the private keys are on that device to sign a transaction. It's to help keep that offline so that if you were ever a cybersecurity type of attack, that that your private keys aren't like on your computer so that someone can't steal it as
Gotcha.
easily. It's
Uh-huh.
like a separation of steps so that it gives one layer extra of protection. But that doesn't mean that if the spouse is holding that, oh, I found these in the sock drawer and I got them. We got the crypto on here. He can just go buy another one or spin up another wallet of the same type or the same infrastructure to it, put in the seed phrase, and poof, he's got access to it again. Just the hardware, having a hardware wallet, let me just say this clearly, having a
Okay.
hardware wallet does not mean that you have control over the crypto.
Okay.
It means you might be able to get access to see what was going on, and there may still be something there. But if you think that he can't or she can't, the spouse can't actually move it without you knowing, because, oh, I have the thing. Nope, they can still move it. So it's not just like, oh, we got them. We got it. We got the crypto. It could be gone. So getting access to it is something that only the spouse will be able to provide password for.
Okay.
But that you can compel.
If you can prove that it existed, like it had to have existed, so now we can go to a judge and we can file for a motion to compel to actually provide the content.
The access to the device, yes.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
that's going to show you the history of all the transactions, which is things that I need to then that's my starting point, right? These little like a transaction hash. So think about the bank account also. we should see money going, like if they were buying crypto, we should see money going to an exchange.
Mm-hmm.
If they were being shady about it and they were using cash, and you just see a lot of cash withdrawals from, at the ATM, maybe they are going to a Bitcoin ATM, right? Which is a physical location that's like it's a kiosk. You put dollars in, you tell it what Bitcoin address you want it to be sent to, it scans it, and then it sends the Bitcoin to that wallet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there's no transaction history really, because it's not, they are licensed. They do keep records themselves, but
Mm-hmm.
you're not gonna get a statement. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Okay.
There's not an account statement like a Coinbase or a Kraken or a Gemini would have.
And is there a way to subpoena that? Like, who are you subpoenaing?
Typically, what you need to do is figure out where those machines are
Uh,
based on your physical location, like
okay.
where you were living at the time, or if there was a commute involved with
Mm,
work for the spouse, and
mm-hmm.
they commuted 45 minutes to an hour every day, even though it's like 15 miles away. You might also want to do a radius search around work. The other thing is to cross-reference where the ATM withdrawals are.
Right.
Are they at the bank? Does he go into the bank, or does she go into the bank branch,
Mm-hmm.
right, and make $5,000 withdrawal? Or are they going to the ATM outside and withdrawing 500 or $1,000 at the ATM outside? And
Right.
is this their main ATM? Is this their home branch? Like, is this a mile from the house? Is this 2 miles from the house? And then you're looking for a radius around there where they're going directly to, a kiosk, potentially depositing the money. And if you can find out what the companies are, then you can subpoena all the companies, and you can provide, they typically ask for, when you register, they ask for things like your phone number.
Okay.
So you'd want to supply things like, here's the spouse's name, phone number, driver's license, social security number, blah, 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 a bunch of stuff. They would cross-reference it in their systems to see even a picture. I would say provide them a picture too, because
Have
they,
security cameras at the
because a lot
kiosk.
of times the kiosks have camera on them.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The other thing you want to provide is the date of when those cash withdrawals that you see on the bank account are, because you're going to
Mm-hmm.
want to give that ATM company a specific window that they can look. Because if they look and they don't see the phone number in the system,
Right.
maybe they were using a burner phone.
Oh, God.
Okay, like
Yeah, sure.
how sneaky are they trying to be?
Right. Exactly.
They didn't use their real name. They didn't use their real phone number. They didn't, you know what I mean? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
then all you have is the date and the picture. And so sometimes they can cross-reference depending on the size of the company. They're like, oh, we had like 500 transactions that day. Like, we're not gonna be able to go through every single thing. And like, so you might get help or you might not,
Right.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
if you provide them with more information, they might send somebody to go look and be able to see, like, okay, we looked at this day after, we knew that the cash came out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Just check your transactions from 4 to midnight, and maybe that's only
Yes.
100, 125 transactions you got to go through. See if there's a camera picture that matches. I'm like, oh, yeah, we found him. He
Yeah.
used this other name, or she
Right.
used another name.
Right. Is this him? And that's not his name. Okay.
Now, this is like, if you can catch little things like that, then you just go to the judge, and it's like, the judge will basically go, okay, whatever you need, we'll make him pay for the crypto expert.
Right. Let's hope. Yes. So, okay. The crypto expert being you. Um,
Because we're basically like a forensic accountant,
mm-hmm.
right? That does
Yeah.
crypto.
And how successful, like what would be your success rate in these kinds of things? I mean, obviously there are a lot of roadblocks here because it's such a different form of currency, but this is what you do. So
Yeah.
you know what they are. How successful are you in these endeavors?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on what success is, right?
Mhm.
Is people measure success by how much money am I going to get out of this? Or sometimes people measure success as I get to I just know that like he wasted it all, right? Or she wasted it all.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
and there's nothing left. But if there's nothing left, that was community property. Usually you have to pay that back.
Usually you have to, exactly. Yeah.
So we're actually very successful. It just depends on how you look at it, right? Because,
Sure.
right, if we find that there's like a bunch of dormant wallets with crypto sitting in them all over the place, and it's likely that they're the owner based on our analysis, then yeah, there could be, however much money is sitting there, 500,000, 100K, 2 mil, but now you know. Or if there's nothing, now you know. Like they got involved, they put in X amount of money, it went up, they tried to reinvest that, they got into a scam and or a rug pull, or they invested it poorly in some meme coin and they lost it all. So it went to zero. Now, why is that also important to know? Because one of the biggest things that people forget in this whole situation is taxes. So if your spouse hasn't been claiming or putting on your taxes crypto ever,
Uh,
that's also a red flag, right? So if you've never seen anything about crypto on your tax returns, but you've had a conversation or there is, if they haven't sold, then there's usually no taxes. But if they are actively trading and swapping a token for another token, every transactional exchange is a taxable event,
ooh,
right? And
interesting.
so what can happen in a in a really negative way for the spouse after the divorce is the IRS can come back after either party for the tax liability. If you have a great job and your degenerate ex-spouse doesn't, and you're
Yeah.
paying alimony, then who's the IRS going to come after? Not him or
Right.
her, because they're broke. They
Right.
don't have a lot of money. They're going to come after you because it was marital
Because it was
funds.
marital. Right. Exactly. You're responsible for it.
So do you see why this is such a big, like, just doing the kind of like the blockchain forensics can help put in perspective the tax liability, right? And we don't do the taxes. So like the data we get, we usually will say, then you're going to need to talk to like a crypto tax expert who can help you, because if it's 1, 2, 3 years of data, they're
Yeah.
going to have to go back and refile all your taxes,
Oh, Jesus.
right?
Yeah.
But it's better to do that than to come back, have somebody come back later and go, you actually owe us 100 grand plus back taxes because you sold all this crypto and you made a bunch of money. Yeah, you lost it, but you also didn't claim your losses, right? So, and if there were losses, then that should have been on the taxes too.
Right. Right. Because that would have been a deduction, I assume.
Right.
Loss.
So
Yeah.
so this is what I mean. There's a whole series of unknowns based on the transactional data that we're not even privy to. So it's like we're trying to scratch the surface. We
Uh-huh.
find out that like, oh, we're seeing wires to a crypto exchange. We need to subpoena that exchange for all the transaction history records, or they need to, the other spouse needs to provide it in discovery,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Download your transaction history from such and such exchange, all of your, and then provide that. Now I can see the deposit coming in cash. I can see the purchase of the Bitcoin, and then I can see the withdrawal of the Bitcoin. And that withdrawal has an address. That is my starting point. So we know the money went from the bank to the exchange, Bitcoin was bought, and then Bitcoin was withdrawn to a wallet. Now, what happened to it?
Where is it now?
So
Right.
then that's when I take my tools and I go in and I can start following it forward. I can also follow it backwards. So if we get something later in time, I can follow it back. I can follow it forward. I can see, oh, it's still sitting there. They actually didn't move it. Some
Right.
cases are very simple, like all the crypto was bought is still sitting on the exchange because they didn't really know what they were doing. They were just investing. Those are simple. It's the guy who thinks he knows what he's doing and was doing a lot of trades and buying NFTs and selling this and doing that and swapping this for that token. And they did like 100 things, but they didn't record really any of it because they were like, whatever, I'm just playing around.
Right.
But that
Right.
it could have a really big tax consequence down the road.
So I just out of curiosity, like what's the largest amount that you have found in a divorce case?
Several million.
Wow.
I've found, but so here's part of the thing, because I'm actually working on a case now that has potentially over 100 million.
Whoa.
But part of the thing with tracking and tracing and doing blockchain forensics is that you don't get names of people.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Right?
You said something about like it's likely to be that person. Now,
Yes. That's the analysis part, right? So
how does
that's
that
where
hold up in
like,
court? Yeah.
well, it's because technology. You have
Yeah.
to understand like there are different types of wallet addresses in
Okay.
Bitcoin.
Okay.
So because Bitcoin from 2009 is not the same as Bitcoin today. They have keep adding and changing and updating and making improvements to the software. As they keep adding things, things change. And in doing so, sometimes the wallet address styles have changed based on the updates. Depending on what version of the Bitcoin software you're running.
Mm-hmm.
So some wallets will start with a 1. Some wallets will start with a 3. Some
Mm-hmm.
wallets start with BC1. So if you see a transaction, it goes BC1 and a bunch of characters. Then the next transaction is BC1 and a bunch of characters. And the next transaction is BC1 and a bunch of characters. And then it goes to 3 and a bunch of characters. That signifies that there's 2 different wallets, basically.
Okay.
Which may mean change in ownership. Not always, but it could. Those are the things that we look at, right? So we're trying to determine we know that the withdrawal, 100% the withdrawal from the exchange going to the wallet address was in his or her control, the spouse's control. Every step away from that,
We don't know.
your degree of certainty goes down. But what you're doing is, let's say there's 10 hops later and then it hits an exchange like crypto.com. Oh, okay. We found an exit point. Maybe they cashed something out. Or maybe 2 hops before that, they sent that to somebody to buy something that they met for somebody in purpose. In person, right? So people will use crypto for things like their bad habits, gambling, purchases of drugs on the dark net, whether that's, just traditional narcotics, pills, regular, methamphetamines, cocaine, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes it's easy. They think it's easier to not have to go meet somebody in person or whatever. So we'll see things where money moved and 6 hops, it hit a dark net market. The great thing about divorce type cases versus law enforcement or criminal type cases is that the burden of proof is on the spouse to prove what they did with the finances, right? So if we say, hey, well, this 6 hops down the road, it looks like you cashed out at a darknet market. What did you buy? Oh, no, I didn't cash out a darknet market. 2 hops before that, I sent this to this, and they should have a transaction record that shows that.
Gotcha. And so the burden of proof is on them as opposed to in law enforcement or federal cases where it's the burden of proof is on the prosecutor.
Basic kind of,
yeah. Yeah. Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right?
Gotcha.
So you can say
and
like all
beyond
this money,
a reasonable doubt, right? So there's reasonable doubt with this when you say like, well, I mean, it's reasonable to assume it was him. And then he has to go ahead and prove that it was or wasn't. Whereas,
for something like for the things that you can't subpoena, for the things you can subpoena, you could check yourself.
Okay.
Right. Like if it goes to an exchange, you can subpoena the exchange and ask. If it comes back and they're like, it's not your guy, well, then he did something with that crypto before and sent it to somebody else.
Gotcha.
But why did he do that? And then should he have to pay that back? what happens, let me do the big picture here. When you start putting the blockchain forensics together, why we're usually very successful is because the data is immutable. It's because it's a publicly recorded ledger. All I'm doing is pointing out what happened on there. And as soon as the other spouse sees that you know what they did, even if you don't have 100% right, there's usually so much evidence that they're just like, I don't want to explain my illegal darknet behavior. I don't want to explain because now you've like touched into the criminal element of things that they shouldn't have been doing.
Right.
So all of a sudden they're like, I just want to settle and get this out of here. Like, I'm going to have to pay you back 40 grand. I'll figure it out, but I don't want to go to jail.
Right. So often there's so much other stuff going on that's associated with the crypto that just having the information that the crypto is there is enough leverage to get them to want to settle so that we don't have to go deeper. That's real. That
I
part, that's
usually
really
don't testify.
Interesting. Yeah. Because once
I would say 95% of the time I don't end up testifying at all, because once they see the data and my statements about how we arrived at it, they're usually like, oh shit, they found it. They know what I was up to.
Yeah.
And then the other lawyer is like, dude, why didn't you tell me this?
Right. Exactly. Then their attorney's like, dude, you need to settle. Otherwise I can't keep you out of jail. Right.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God.
Or like, you're going to have to get a criminal attorney next.
Like, right. Exactly. It was going to cost you a hell of a lot more. So settle. Okay. God, I mean, it's so fascinating it's so interesting because I feel like crypto is, I always want to be like, oh, it's like this. It's like, oh, we can liken it to this. We can liken it to that. But like, actually we can't, because the whole point is that it's not. Right.
Yeah. And that's a human nature, is to always look for things that are similar so we can be comfortable with it. Right. And so there are little things that are similar, like, oh, this kind of works like that. Oh, this kind of works like this.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's not really.
It's not. Again, Chris, we could talk about this all day, but tell us where people can find you and how they can work with you if they need your services in all of this.
Yeah, well, I hope you don't.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like I said, I've talked to several attorneys, and they only really need us when things are ugly.
Right. Mm-hmm. Sure.
But if you need to get a hold of us, you can reach us at our website, CoinStructive.com. And there's a contact us form there, and you can reach out and just get a hold of us that way. And we'll set up an appointment to talk, to kind of give you an overview of how we operate, what we do. It's pretty straightforward. We ask you to collect the data so that we can actually do the digging. Right. And the tracking and tracing. So we need the starting points. But we help with the questions for discovery and interrogatories, and we can do device inspections too. So like if there's computers and tablets and phones that you have access to and you think there might be crypto on, we can screen those as well. Yeah. Just like law enforcement would screen devices for like child pornography or whatever, right? Yeah, like, right. We do the same thing, but our tools are looking for crypto artifacts. So things that have been installed on the computer, things in the web browser, websites they visited, conversations, text messages, DMs, seed phrases. Because the other thing is if you can actually find the crypto and access it, like you get the hardware wallet, you have the seed phrase, we recommend moving those assets to a lawyer or court controlled wallet, right? Interesting. So that
sort of like an escrow
either
account?
Party, kind of, yes. Right. So like as the attorney, you can set up a wallet and say, hey, we found spouse's crypto. We have the ability to move that crypto. Let's move it to a wallet address that we control, rather than him like getting access to it and then moving it again. And now we have to keep following it and trying, right? Yeah.
Gotcha.
That way you can just divide the assets.
Right.
50-50. And I always try to, like, and if you're going to divide those assets, don't divide them based on dollar value. Divide them on like if there's 25 Ethereum, 12 and a half and 12 and a half. Don't look at it as the dollar. value.
Mm.
Unless the splitting is like spouse wants to keep, I want to keep the crypto. I'll buy you out. I've seen that also.
Sure. But then what about like, no, this was a marital asset and it was like, so, I mean, this could go both ways. It was a marital asset. Let's say you invested $500,000 in X. It is now worth, 200,000. I want 250 because that was a marital asset I gave no permission for you to use in that way. So that's a loss for the person who hid the money, which like, oh, well, cry me a fucking river. But then on the flip side, could the person with the crypto say, well, it was $500,000 when I invested it, so 250 of that would be yours. It's now worth $1 million. Like, is it based on the value? Like at time of separation, let's say
This value at time of
the
separation.
value, yeah, so that it is. So we can't say, yeah, but you took $500,000 of marital assets and put it towards something that even if it's a loss.
I've seen people argue it both ways. There is some creative freedom here.
Okay. Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
So, because you're always going to want to go after the largest amount.
Right.
But if there is a loss, that loss should have been on the taxes.
Uh-huh.
So there should have been a benefit to both parties, especially if you're filing married or jointly, right?
Okay.
Because then that loss would have been recorded. But if they weren't staying up on their taxes and sharing as things went forward, then that's not going to be on there. So I don't know if the like going back and saying that the value was this at the start and now it's this, you should owe me the original. I don't know if that will work if the assets are still under control and they're just at a lower value now.
All right. This is all so fascinating. You guys, if this is something that you are struggling with or you're concerned about, definitely hit Chris and his team up at CoinStructive.com. And you also have a nonprofit. Yes?
Yeah, I do. I'm working on launching a nonprofit called the Crypto Recovery Alliance.
Yeah.
And that's mostly for victims who've been like scammed and defrauded, who don't have the resources to pay for blockchain forensic services.
Gotcha.
So we're trying to help the people who need it the most.
That's scam.
And can also get access then to things like some preventative education around scams, so they know when they're being retargeted, because that's what happens usually is you get scammed once, then you're on a scam list. And they keep coming at you to try to get more money out of you. It's just a different form.
Never ending. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's also a mental health care aspect to it. So people can actually process being the victim and the trauma that they're going through, because a lot of times it ends up sometimes, like, funny enough, if you took marital assets, invested them, and then got scammed and lost your entire life savings that you and your spouse put together, guess what the next step is?
Yeah.
Divorce.
Sure.
Right. And so now that other spouse, like, you may not want any harm to your ex or soon to be ex. You don't want them causing any harm to themselves. But if they become isolated, their adult children aren't talking to them, their performance at work goes down, they lose their job, like all this cascade of things, suicide becomes an option.
Absolutely.
Right? Which is why mental health needs to be in part of this as well. So, being validated as a victim and working through that to get your life back to where we want it to be is why we are called the Crypto Recovery Alliance, because it's not just about getting your crypto back, it's about recovering holistically.
I love that. That's really wonderful. Chris, thank you so much for coming on and talking about all of this. It's been a really fascinating and enlightening conversation. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of.
Thanks for having me, Kate.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.